Hi, I'm Eric Henry here with Mike White for part 2 of our 4-part series. So in the first video, we talked about this idea of why an AV integrator should consider selling signage, and you took the time to share a little bit about the history, because obviously you have a rich history of being part of this signage industry for many, many years and having lots of perspective to lend to it. Today, what I'd like to do is tackle this question of why in the world is selling signage so hard?
Where can a systems integrator, a channel partner, focus their attention in digital signage and have success? It is like going hunting and knowing not where to shoot or what to shoot at.
Yeah.
Digital signage covers a wide scope of applications. Yeah. The one that's most common thought of, and the one that was earliest thought of by the AV integrator, which is why there were a lot of failures, was the idea that we should sell digital signage in the retail environment. Well, Eric, that is not a sweet spot for the AV integrator. Now, that's not to say that an AV integrator, because I've had success selling retail digital signage, but that is for the more seasoned and been at it a while, and identifying that marketplace as the key area of focus is not where the integrator is going to make their money. It's going to be in corporate communication, it's going to be in manufacturing, it's going to be in education, it's going to be in museums, it's going to be in transportation. It is knowing where to shoot. Let's talk about why it is that it's so difficult to sell right now. It has to do with the fact that most salespeople do not feel confident that they can ask the right questions. So there is that element of you need to understand what the questions are. You need to understand who to ask for. I suggest to you, if you want to really separate yourself, you learn how to walk the walk and talk the talk yourself, because as soon as you start owning the knowledge of how these CMS packages work, then you start finding the return on investments for your companies and stuff. So there's
and I'd love to speak to that a little bit. The reason we're even doing this series, why we're sitting down from my perspective, is we've asked you the question, how can we as a manufacturer do a better job of helping you, the AV integrator? Because similarly, when AV integrators didn't know where to shoot, we as a manufacturer didn't really know where to shoot in terms of digital signage can apply to so many different industries. And so how do you decide what features you put into your CMS and what's important to your customers if it's so broad that you can't do anything specific? And so a big shift for us has been to really focus, as you were mentioning, on specific industries. And so we talk about corporate communications, manufacturing, we do well in the government space. We really focus on education as Carousel. And so when somebody comes to us and says, hey, can we do proof of play ad stuff? We say no, because that's not really relevant to our
retail
customers.
World.
But I think the other thing that's really important is we're not the solution across, like as an AV integrator, they shouldn't just have Carousel. I would love that, don't get me wrong. If you guys want to just sell Carousel all day long, I would encourage you to do that, but not really, because there are certain situations where Carousel simply just doesn't make sense.
Let me speak to that as the AV integrator. I will suggest to you that is one of the biggest challenges as to how do you know which CMS companies to work with. The CMS companies that are out there, they all differentiate themselves in some ways to help them to be a better fit. I would suggest to you that the AV integrator with their engineer becomes familiar with at least 3 or 4 CMS applications so that they have the ability to be an integrator. What is an integrator, Eric? An integrator, this is a big differentiator. An integrator asks questions. It's not a measure of how much they know, it's do they know what questions to ask?
Yeah.
And so it is in the learning of what questions that you identify what CMS. So when they ask the questions and they come back to the engineer and said, these are the things I found out that my customer really needs, that engineer should have a playbook of at least 3 or 4 CMSs that says, well, based on the interrogation of what your questions are, this one is the best fit for this particular application. Let's go back and ask more questions, ask Carousel to join us and to help us identify. And the wonderful thing is, because I've been on those calls with Kelly and others where we basically came to the conclusion that Carousel was not the perfect fit. And that's the big integrity element of saying, we need to go back and look at a different one, because it's, like you said, Carousel is a wonderful, broad platform with many vertical applications. But it is not a panacea.
Right.
It does not fit everywhere.
Right. One of the things that I've been excited about for this series, because perhaps you're most well known for your gotchas of digital signage. And so if we could just spend a few minutes, I'd love for you to just share with us, what are some of those gotchas that you like to share with an AV integrator, or even an end customer that might be tuning into this series?
Yeah, well, I would say one of the biggest gotchas have to do with the area of IT, connectivity. Wi-Fi is presented to most everybody as the panacea of connectivity. But in the world of digital signage, a direct hard connect is absolutely the very best, and if at all possible, needs to be the way that it's done. I'm even working with a customer now that the reality is they had invested in hundreds of flat panels, hundreds of players, and I've been to 3 sites, and Eric, there's better than 50 or 60% of the screens that are dark.
Yeah.
Do you know
They're
what?
not a Carousel customer, though.
They're not a Carousel customer.
Okay.
Has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with IT and connectivity.
Absolutely.
Because even the company that they chose for their CMS, it's not their fault.
Right, absolutely.
Somebody didn't explain. Well, it could have been their fault. It could have been their fault because the salesperson didn't really encourage the fact that if you don't have connectivity, you don't have it. But the point is, IT is one of those elements. One of the things that today that most commonly plague an integrator is when a customer will say, "Well, can I show TV in that particular thing?" And the integrator, even though they techie know HDCP, they forget about the fact that it is illegal to actually distribute that signal without the proper conditions being met, and they oftentimes overlook that.
Certainly.
And so they'll just think, well, yeah, sure, I've seen TV on digital signage. We can do that. You have logistics like viewing distances, dwell times. One of the most common gotchas is to forget that people, they didn't walk into that building or into that hallway with the idea, I am going to look at that sign. No, they walk in there and your goal is to get their attention. The early days of when I started doing digital signage with Office Depot was we thought the key area thing was to just rebroadcast their TV commercials. And we put up 15, 20 screens. And the end result was people, they weren't staying engaged. They weren't there for 30 seconds or a full minute. People need to study the dwell times. They need to study sight lines. Like, there were many applications where digital signage has been sold, and they sent out the installer, and the installer, they know how to hang a flat panel. Sure, I know how to find the stud. I know how to make sure that it put a safety wire on it. It won't fall. I know how to meet the requirements, but they forgot to step back and see, can people actually see this? It's right behind a column, or the glare off of the window is simply not allowing a person to read the content. This will be a really good time to suggest to you that as an integrator, a helpful tool that you can give your customers and you can read yourself, especially when it comes down to content, is get the book Don't Make Me Think. It allows you to get the mindset of telling a message with pictures and fewer words, and respecting the time period, because that is our biggest challenge today in digital signage, is people walking right by a flat panel and not paying any attention.
One of the things that I have spent quite a bit of time the last several years, knowing the history of AV integration, all the experience we kind of talked about with the difficulty of signage, as Carousel, we came up with this term shrink wrap to signage for how to deploy signage. But I thought about, as I go to AV integrators, I want to make sure that the actual selling experience is super smooth. So I came up with this 3-step idea of how we could make shrink wrap to signage even apply to the selling of signage. And so I remember very distinctly as you and I started in relationship, going through a slide presentation that you had, and seeing this bicycle illustration that you share and immediately being overwhelmed by it and thinking, this is in stark contrast to what I'm trying to message to AV integrators. But I couldn't deny the truth of that illustration that you were sharing. And so I would love for you to kind of share a little bit about what motivated you to put this bicycle illustration in there that you share with AV integrators, and what was your thought when I sort of threw that at you from my perspective of going, I want an AV integrator to believe that this is like super smooth and easy and it just happens.
Well,
so I'd love
first
for you to
off,
share about that.
hearing when you addressed me, I realized, okay, well, maybe I was too harsh in this presentation, because I do realize that, see, I was speaking to the integrator in that messaging about the way that in the Wild Wild West, the early days of digital signage, that it was so much more than a box, that the best way that I could illustrate that was the picture of a father and a wife that are sitting there at 2 a.m. in the morning trying to put together 100+ parts for the bicycle that they are to give their 6-year-old boy that next morning. I have been there, done that, lived the nightmare, and that is not too distant from the reality of the way digital signage was in the early days before, well, one, it was mature. A lot of the stuff that was sold up front, I called it vaporware, because it was promises about stuff that it would do that.
I'm happy we never did that, but yeah,
but
certainly our competitors did.
But the reality is vaporware was more real than the software was. Yes, it's true in the future, But so this bicycle illustration was trying to reflect all the moving parts that make up a successful digital signage deployment, long-term deal, lots of puts together. And so when I first showed you this exploded view of this bicycle, you go, oh, yeah. Well, the reality is, I really think that our industry has got to the point, thanks to organizations like Carousel, that we have more of a custom bicycle shop experience now, where you're not having to put it together. Somebody that already knows what they're doing has put it together. But now you're going in and we're saying, okay, stand there. How high does the seat need to be? How wide do the handlebars need to be? How do we adjust the stride, the pedal stroke, the whole 9 yards? Because you all have done this so many times that it's like this is in a shrink wrap of success, and it's not in a collection of a 10,000 piece puzzle.
Right.
It is in a smooth way of addressing digital signage, but it's still not a box. It never will be a box.
So back to your illustration, I love this picture of Christmas Eve, and you're trying to put this bike together. And I think the goal, right, was joy, right? Like the joy of parents giving their kids a bike. Is it possible as a salesperson in digital signage to actually enjoy or have fun selling signage?
Oh, well, I have fun selling digital signage because I see, when I'm explaining it, how it can benefit them, when I'm explaining it to an integrator and the lights start coming on. It's like me being out there and at a presentation at Infocom or NAB or DSE or one of the many places that I've presented. It's that we're into it 30 minutes and I'm starting to see people look up and go, I get it. I get it. But I will tell you, the only way that you can have fun selling digital signage is to own it. You can't treat it like a new model of a flat panel, just another 42-inch, 46-inch, whatever it is. No, you got to look for it at what it is today and where it's going. I mean, we have all sorts of exciting future to us. There's a new shiny nickel element of digital signage just around the bend every single day with this. Most end users are tired of being asked, okay, is that steel studs or is that wooden stud? How high is your ceiling? What's your ambient lighting? What are your wind conditions in here? Are you going to get the wave effect on your screen blowing back and forth? No. With this, you get to talk about, wow, think about how we can communicate with your employees in the hybrid workspace and still bring them in as a part of the team. So yeah, it's a blast selling digital signage, but there's an investment to get there.